We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Influencers come in many different packages. Today, I'm talking about the kind of change that one man with a consistent message and an open heart can have in himself and in hundreds or thousands of other people. Those of you who are part of the Mankind Project may already know him, but for all of our other listeners, today I'm talking to Jim Katona. I'm introducing you to Jim because of who he is and also because of what he represents for me. The power of realistic, positive beliefs over the long term. Jim's been a roofer, a clown, a preacher, and an artist. He is a man of service and a man with passion to make the world a better place. And he's been doing that for decades in some really challenging places and through some really challenging circumstances. If you have a leaning toward manifestation, man, I've got some good vibes in store in this episode. We talk about change and challenge. We talk about grieving and loss. We talk about some secrets to building a strong marriage from Jim's perspective and the value of persistence. Jim is an influencer, and I hope his big heart influences you. So without further ado, I welcome you into the spirit of harmonious cooperation with respect. This is the Mankind Podcast. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast. It's Boys and Hodgson, the show where we are breaking the mold of modern manhood and setting out to prove that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. I am heart open and joyfully here with you today with my friend Jim Katona. Jim, say hello.
Hello, everybody, and thanks, Boyson. It's good to be here.
Jim and I first met in 2009 in Glen Ivy, California, at what was then the International Gathering of the Mankind Project. Men from all around the world, usually somewhere around 150 men, would come and gather. And Jim was, I believe at that time, were you center director of Philly at that time?
Yep.
Was the center director of Philadelphia. I was the center director for New England. And we formed a fast connection, which was rich, and there was some conflict and there was juicy discovery and all kinds of stuff. Jim is a guy doing a thing. That is his self-description for bio. When he was young, Jim never thought he would see his 30th birthday. And instead, he's now 66 years old. He's been the honorary co-chairman of the Mankind Project for 2 decades. And he is the ambassador to the spirit of harmonious cooperation in the Mankind Project. He is ubiquitous. He is everywhere. He is in many circles. He is a supporter, a giver, a donor, a volunteer, a heartwarmer. He is all kinds of things. And so the first question I'm going to ask in the interview, Jim, is, has anyone mentioned the spirit of harmonious cooperation to you yet today?
So you just did, Boyson, and yeah. So thank you.
Where did that come from? Where did the spirit of harmonious cooperation come from? Talk about how you've been using that, how you've been living life with that.
So it was January 4th, I believe, in 2014, in the basement of a man named Craig Lippman, who we affectionately also know as the Sensing Owl, was the first trustee board meeting here in Philadelphia, where I had stepped up to be the shadow chair or the shadow watcher. And Pat McCoy had stepped up to be the center director. And his opening question for check-in was, name one thing that you'd like to see happen in MKP Philadelphia over the coming year in your role on the trustee board. And my answer was something along the lines, I'd like to see more cooperation and less competition among the constituencies. And at the end of the meeting, he challenged us in the checkout to say one thing you're going to do to create what you would like to see happen this year. And my answer to him was, I'm not sure yet, but when I figure it out, I'll let you know. And then I went about doing anything and everything I could think of to promote cooperation over competition. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, I like to play with words in my mind. I was trying to figure out how to say it in a catchphrase type way, and I came up with the spirit of harmonious cooperation. And so I just started repeating it and sharing it every opportunity I had. Yeah, that's where it originated from.
Thank you. So what I have witnessed, 2014, so 10 years ago, and what I have witnessed in the Mankind Project across the United States and in global circles is that Jim's energy of this spirit of harmonious cooperation infects everything he touches. So now there are many circles where many meetings, many groups, virtual meetings, Zoom meetings, in-person meetings, people circling up, where somebody will invoke Jim Katona's name and said, has anybody mentioned the spirit of harmonious cooperation today? And there is something in here about the power, the magic, the transformative power of words that I think that you just have a natural ability for. And what have you seen occur in MKP and outside of MKP as the ambassador to this spirit?
Right. So I was ever mindful of the power of words, and also creating the reality that I want. We all have that opportunity. And so, the impact comes from, in part, from my background in understanding the Fool, the sacred Fool. And for several years, I was a Christian clown minister from the late 70s to early 80s, part of a troupe called the Faith and Fantasy Clowns. And I was nonverbal. I was a pantomime clown and was aware that, words, when they're spoken in a good way and they're limited, right? Less is more. And that I could create more beauty in the world. As you know, Boyson, early on in our career in Glen Ivy in 2009, there wasn't very much cooperation among different constituencies. There were a lot of challenges. We were all stuck in our place of owning our judgments and projections, but believing that mine's the only right one in a lot of ways, and not really listening to each other, and fighting for our own agendas. And that's, it's not just in MKP, it's in the world. It's in the corporate world, right? I'm going to advance by stepping on your neck on the way up the ladder, kind of thing, and all that, right? And it's just a neat thing that I was able to bring it forward and actually shift the energy in the room. And I learned how to shift the energy as a clown, right? And it's about paying attention, seeing what's going on, and speaking when sometimes it's not appropriate and other times when it is appropriate. And it's been very uh, fulfilling for me in my life. It's brought me back into life and it's given me
Mm.
purpose. So, Pat McCoy's the one who deemed me the ambassador to the spirit of harmonious cooperation about 18 months after I started running around saying it everywhere. And some folks didn't embrace it right away, right? I don't know. So I hope Scotty won't be upset that I'm sharing his name, but Scotty Krabler has shared with me that, the first 50 times he heard me say the spirit of harmonious cooperation, he was like, what the heck's this
Mm.
nitwit doing? Like it really didn't resonate for him and he didn't see the value in it. But we met in sometime 17, I think, or 18, 2007, down in Florida at one of the
Yeah.
annual gatherings. And we got to meet each other. And now we're the best of friends and support each other in a beautiful way. It's just been a real pleasure to move forward and, as the ambassador. And I take it serious in a
This
funny
is
kind of way.
it's an archetypal thing, right? Like we've done plenty of podcasts talking
Yeah,
about different archetypes of the king and the magician and the lover and the warrior and the sovereign and the steward and the nurturer, but the clown is an incredibly
right.
powerful archetype, and I think that you define it pretty well. The clown is very aware. The clown is always watching. That jester archetype is always watching.
And very powerful and influential, right? Has the capacity to be. But also, throughout history, right, the clown is also vulnerable and, liable to be beheaded, is like the court jesters in Europe and things.
Yes.
Um, and, there's stories about all that. And I did a lot of research on it, right? When I was 19 years old, I
Mm.
started clowning. When most men are running around trying to find their masculinity, right? I was running around with a blue wig and rainbow suspenders and white painter pants painted up and handing out balloons that had love on them to people at nursing homes and hospitals and, different workshops and things.
Talk about the people out there. So we're gonna move toward the next statement, the next thing. So the spirit of harmonious cooperation with respect. So you said the people out there and how you started doing that kind of work when you were very young, but you have continued. So you're in Philly. You have lived in Philadelphia for a long time. There's an area of Philadelphia called Kensington, which folks who live there will be aware. Let's talk about Kensington and the work that you've done.
So Kensington in Philadelphia back in the late 80s or early 90s was deemed by 60 Minutes to be the opiate capital, possibly the opiate capital of the world, with drug addiction and homelessness and things of that nature. I have two brothers who died from drug related instances. And so I started volunteering my time down in Kensington. And the respect thing came from a prayer and meditation later on in 2014 around the word respect. I just did a little thing that I do in my mind, and I just asked the universe or God or whatever it is that people want to refer to that, whatever it is that's bigger than us that we don't understand,
Yes.
right? And I don't claim to know what it is, but I closed my eyes thinking on, what message do you have for me around the word respect?
Yeah.
And an acronym came to me immediately. And originally, it was remember everyone suffers painful events, communicate tenderly. But after thinking about it and praying on it and sharing it with a dear friend of mine who's part of Women Within, and we've been lifelong friends, I decided to change events to experiences. And so I started sharing that, and I had little posters made up. And, it was 2017, and I had been sitting on respect and wondering, how am I going to share this with the world? When I was invited to be part of a living art exhibit at the Perlman Building, which is an annex to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, with a group called Reconstruction Inc., which is about returning citizens from prison. And I got there early. They had this big table that had paper rolled out. It was about 60 feet long. It was a bunch of marble top tables that were put together. And it had a big 6 foot wide by 60 feet long piece of paper rolled out that had little cartoons on it and things that you could color and spaces for people to doodle. And I was like, I'm going to get in real early. I'm going to put the respect thing there and I'm going to walk away. And nobody's going to know where it came from. And so I'm there and I got my little crowns and I'm writing it all down. And the woman who was the manager, right, the program manager for the event, come walking around the corner, and they called me Bear, and she said, Bear, what are you doing? I said, nothing. And she was about 30 yards away, and she came over, her name's Phoebe, and she looked over my shoulder and said, that's really cool. And the woman, Ann, who was the assistant curator for the museum, was walking the other way, and she was quite a distance away, but your voice echoes in that buildings. And she said, what's really cool? And Phoebe said, come on over and look. And she looked, and they gave me 150 copies of that acronym on 11 by 17 posters as a gift on the last day of the event.
Lovely.
And then I was like, well, okay, this is how it's going to get shared with the world. And from there, I had stickers made up and postcards, and I would print them out on my computer and laminate them and hand them out or leave them on a bus and give them to the waitress and just hand them out everywhere. My involvement in Kensington with helping folks who are struggling with, being unhomed and addiction and whatnot led me to get involved with a place called the Kensington Storefront, which was an art therapy type place that gave tea and, coffee and pizza and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or cold water and summer, place for people to come in and get out of their misery and just be people, for a while.
Yeah.
And that put me in touch with some folks from the Mural Arts program. And so I'm emotional right now. I'm fighting tears back.
Thank you.
It's just so beautiful, right? A guy named John Zerby from the Mural Arts program said to me, he said, Jimmy, he says, I found a place for your mural, for your respect thing. He says, but I don't have permission to put it up. And he might tell me to take it down right away, but we're going to go put it up anyway and see what he says. And so that was at Philly Unknown, which is a nonprofit here in Kensington in Philly. Yeah. It's on the 3300 block of Root Street. In the they call it the Root Street Garden. And so the mural is the part that I'm responsible for is the respect piece. Yep. Is 12 and a half feet high and 8.5 feet wide. And the mural itself, which was designed in part by me, but by 3 other artists and then painted by about 30 different people, is about 80 feet wide and, 15 feet tall. And actually, Stephen Hovanek came in from Indiana, and Patrick Stretland came down from North Jersey with his son to help paint the mural on the wall. And it was just a beautiful thing. And it's still there today.
Yes. There,
So,
look down in the show notes when you get here. I've got some photographs of the mural itself and of Jim with the mural, and I just want to, so that it's in here without any what it was and then what it became. What is the RESPECT acronym? Just do the whole thing.
remember, everyone suffers painful experiences. Communicate tenderly.
Again, the power of words to change the environment, to change how people relate to each other, to change what gets focused on in our context. I think that you have a kind of magical gift to be able to create that and share it in the world, spread it in the world.
Thank you. And so that was 10 years ago, right? So it was in late February or early March that I did the meditation that gave me the RESPECT acronym. So celebrating the 10-year anniversary, I went through the same process.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a second acronym for the word respect that, like, this is a public announcement here. It's not really public yet, right? And it's like the question I asked was, what have I learned in that 10 years
Yeah,
of
perfect.
honoring and living with that acronym in my mind and in my spirit? And what I came up with is restoring emotional stability, providing empathetic, compassionate transformation. So, and I'm curious what's going to happen 10 years from now when I do it again.
Restoring emotional stability, and do the rest again.
Yeah, right. Restoring emotional stability, providing empathetic, compassionate transformation.
I can't wait to
Right.
see what
Now I got to
happens with
find
that.
a place to paint that on a wall somewhere else.
Big again.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about men's work a little bit, because you and I, of course, met through men's work in the Mankind Project. And
Yep.
I feel like I've gotten to have somewhat of a glimpse into your own transformation, your own compassionate transformation over time. What has being in a men's group, being part of the Mankind Project, meant for you?
So it's changed my life. Right. I was an angry man. I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. There was a lot of violence, um, sexual inappropriateness from adults. Um, my religious education was harmful. I'm left handed. And in first grade, I was told that that was the devil's hand, and I was cracked on the knuckles and told to write with my right hand. Um, and I don't want to, go into that, but there were a lot of instances where I was traumatized.
Yeah.
Um, but the one thing that the whole left-handed thing taught me was that sister really didn't know what she was talking about.
Hmm.
Because I was certain that it wasn't the devil making me pick up the pencil in my left hand, you know. But so I lived most of my life angry. And in June of 1999, I went through my New Warrior training adventure. And it changed my life. And, we come away from that with a um, spirit guide type thing at the time. We went through a process. And I left that weekend with the name of the spirit guide name of Gentle Grizzly. And I was anything but the Gentle Grizzly.
Yeah.
But I left with the intention of learning what the Gentle Grizzly would be like And what does it have to teach me about how I can live my life more effectively?
Mm.
And so, this past June was the 25th anniversary of my NWTA. And the man I was then wouldn't recognize the man I am today in a whole lot of ways.
Wow.
Right. I I actually love myself. Right. Um, and it's not easy. It wasn't an easy path for me.
Yeah.
Um, it and not everybody in the Mankind Project was helpful for me. And I give the most credit and gratitude for those men because they taught me the most about myself. And, I still continue to learn and grow and do whatever I can to give back. So I definitely would either have shortly after that date, if I didn't experience my NWTA, I most definitely would have been in jail for a long time
Mm.
for murder because there were a few people I was about to kill, or been killed, been dead, at the hands of the police. It just was a terrible thing. And so it showed up at the right time in my life.
Yeah.
And then October of that year is the anniversary of me being bestowed the title of honorary co-chairman of the Mankind Project by Don Jones, who was the chairman of the project at the time and the full leader on the October NWTA in 1999.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you think it was that Don saw in you? So Don is kind of he's passed on now, but he was a legend. He's one of the giants in the Mankind Project. He was a pastor, a poet, a storyteller, a, a booming voice. He was just that man. He was one of those men. What do you think it was in that led to that happening?
so I want to acknowledge that August 12th, I believe, or the 11th, whichever that Monday is this year, is the fourth anniversary of his passing. And he was a mentor of mine over the phone for a decent time after the October weekend. And, what did he see in me? So I actually got in trouble on Friday night on the training. There was a man on the weekend who had been in prison for 9.5 years. And he got out the Thursday before the week of the weekend.
Wow.
And somebody thought it was a good idea to put him on the weekend. He got to the Friday night to contraband, and he said, "I don't want no parts of this.
Yep.
I'm out of here." And he walked out the door without any of his stuff. They were trying to talk him into waiting till tomorrow morning. And the co-leader came to me and two men on leader track and said, "You three come with me." And then he said, "You wait here at the pavilion at Deer Park." And he says, "I'm going to go down and talk to him. If I call safety, come get me and help me." Right. Well, I looked at that and I was like, well, by the time he calls safety and I get there, somebody's going to be hurt pretty bad. So I shimmied along the verge on the other side of the path they were on in the shadows and just stayed out of sight. And so what happened was the man actually stopped and he said, "Okay," he said, "we'll take you home. We're going to take you home. You can't go out there. You're in the middle of nowhere. There's no place for you to go. There's no payphone. You're going to get lost and you're going to be, we need to, we'll get you home." And he said, "Okay." And he turned around and started walking back. And the man said, "Would you consider waiting till tomorrow morning?" And this man lost his stuff. And I'm not going to tell you what he said, but they weren't very kind words. And I simply stepped out between him and the co-leader, and I looked at the guy, and I said, "My friend, I'm not here to hurt you. I said, but I am here to make sure that you don't hurt anybody else and nobody gets hurt, including you. I said, I have my keys in my pocket. And if they're not putting you in a car in 20 minutes, I will drive you home myself. I promise you that. So later on at the staff meeting, I got yelled at for not listening to the co-leader in front of the staff. And then Don Jones said, at the end of the meeting, Katona, I want you to stay here. I need to talk to you. So he asked me, right, and the co-leader stayed as well. And he asked me, he said, well, why didn't you listen to what you were told? I said, it didn't make sense to me, and I wasn't going to argue about it. I just did what made sense. And I just said, I just knew that I wasn't able to do what he was asking me to do. But I didn't need to talk to him about it. He did what he needed to do, and I did what I needed to do, and it all worked out. That led to me and Don Jones talking till about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning that night. But then on Saturday night, and we were all outside, and it was a big crowd, and everybody was checking in. And I was being playful, right? And I said, I'm the Gentle Grizzly, and I live in Philadelphia, and I will be the next chairman of the Mankind Project. And Don Jones, he was standing about 20 feet away, and he was looking right at me, and he goes, Katona, you can have it now if you want. And David Michael, who's a respected elder here in Philly, come running up, and he grabbed me by the shirt, and he pulled himself up close to me, and he said, you be careful what you say right now, because that man has an integrity issue if you tell him that you accept it. He has to give it to you, and you're not in any position to do that. And he stepped away, and I thought about it, and everybody was cheering, and it was just a fun thing, and things quieted down. And I said, Don, I'm very grateful for your generous offer, and I respectfully decline, and I would be honored to be considered as the honorary co-chairman. And you're the honorary co-chairman of the Mankind Project, And it was just a lot of fun. I was clowning.
Yes.
Right? And it led me to this, Right? So, one of the other things is I have a lot of theater experience in opera that might be surprising to folks. But I've been in 59 different operas as a supernumerary, it's called. It's extra in a movie. Right? It's like being an extra in a movie. I didn't have any speaking parts. Because of my clowning experience and my stage presence and understanding how to be where I need to be and do what I need to do, I was offered a lot of fairly decent roles sometimes, and sometimes they really sucked. But I got to be on stage in operas and stuff and meet a whole lot of neat people. And so I saw his theatrics, and I saw his persona and his, and it kind of, we lined up with each other. And, he saw him in me, right? The part of himself in me that I saw the part of myself in him at the same time on the weekend. And I think that's what led to the whole thing.
And there's something there that we can immediately expand into men's work, right? So the discomfort that we can be to one another is often, and this is proven true for me over and over and over, the guys that trigger the shit out of me are the guys who have something to teach me. And you were totally
Absolutely.
One of those men too. Like back in 2009, you definitely were one of those guys for me. And what has the Mankind Project taught you about being in relationship?
So learning how to listen to understand is, I think, the greatest gift that I've received in MKP in my journey. And it's not just in MKP, but MKP plays a large part in it. In my journey from trauma and grief recovery, and working in I groups and, trainings and NWTAs and just hanging out with guys and sharing, I've learned the value in learning to understand and not being attached to the outcome is another piece. Yeah. It's multifaceted. But the less attached to the outcome and the more I listen to understand, the more I get what I actually want, realizing that I'm not in control of anything at all, right? It just happens. I need to plan. I need to figure out. I need to have a plan and move forward with the plan and know that to be flexible, right? Darwin's theory of the fittest is true in some circumstances. But the reality is it's the most adaptable who will survive the longest. I've learned to adapt and fit in wherever I'm at. I just I work on fitting out, not fitting in, right? It's the whole thing of the fool is to be the contrarian. Where there's chaos, I want to bring order. And where there's order, I want to bring chaos or laughter or humor, right? To create balance, because we need both. And I think that's where I'm most effective.
But you dodged the question. How has this helped your marriage?
Oh, how does it help my marriage? First of all, I want to give a lot of credit to my first wife, Mary Jo. I learned a lot from the mistakes I made in that marriage. And for a long time, I was angry at her. And I'm realizing that it was my ability, my inability to listen to her, to understand, created a lot of the circumstances there. And what I've learned in MKP and learning to listen to understand, and it's been, how's it helped, right? When Dawn gets upset, right? Early in our marriage, she would get upset and she would, blow the fuse and start venting. I used to take all that stuff on and used to take it personal. But I would just listen to understand without taking it on. And then when she was all finished, I would say, thank you for sharing. Please tell me more. And sometimes it's not helpful, the things I've learned in MKP. She still says to me just the other day, don't process me. I'm not here for that. I'm not one of your MKP brothers, and she reminds me. But one of the earliest agreements we made was that I'm not responsible for her happiness, and she's not responsible for mine.
Yes.
That was a big mistake I made in my first marriage. We both thought we were responsible for each other's happiness. I express gratitude, right? Joyitude, right? All the time with Dawn, right? 15, 20 times a week, sometimes 15, 20 times a day. And she gets sick of hearing it, but she doesn't lash out. I go, hey, honey. And she'll go, what? I said, how did I get so lucky to be married to you? Thank you for doing the dishes, right? Thank you for walking the dog. Thank you for going to work. I'm retired now, but I was on disability for a long time. And, and we thank each other. And she doesn't do the dishes all the time. I don't do them as often as I could either, And one of the other things, I've learned how to regulate myself, right?
Yes.
To stay in balance with my emotions through MKP, right? To sit with whatever's going on and just be present. One time, I guess it was about 4 or 5 years ago, one of the best choices I made in our relationship, when it was a very tense moment and I was frustrated and she was upset with me. And I said to her, I said, Dawn, I have to go out. I just need to leave and get away. I said, I don't know where I'm going. I'm not sure when I'll get back. And I got in the car and I started driving around. And I came back about 3 hours later. And she had said, I'm going to bed. And so when I came home, she was in bed. And she was still upset. I could feel the tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I got in bed next to her and I rolled over facing away from her, going, well, I'm just going to let it be what it is. And she rolled over and said, "Where'd you go?" And I took my phone and I showed her a picture of the headstone at the cemetery where her mother and father are buried. And I said, "I went to visit your mom and dad and tell them how grateful I am for the daughter that they raised that I'm married to today. And how sorry I am that I said or did anything that would cause her as much pain that caused her today." I never would have been able to do that. I'm happily married, dude. And it's not easy and it takes a lot of work. And I'm grateful that she's willing to do all that work. I wouldn't be married to me for 10 minutes. And we're going on 17 years.
Congratulations.
And I'm grateful. Not one time have we cursed each other out. Not once. Called each other a name. We haven't called each other a nasty name or thrown them violent words at each other.
Yes.
Not once. And we've had pretty intense and heated conversation. Right? Without the harmful toothpaste that comes out of the tube that you can't put back. Right? How cool is that? It's pretty cool. At least I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So as long as I've known you, that has been, you and I don't talk all the time, but we talk frequently in short conversations. And I don't think that I've ever had a conversation with you ever that you didn't acknowledge how grateful you were for Dawn
Right. Yeah.
and your relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, welcome, listeners. The Mankind Podcast, where we will talk about emotional things and actually be emotional. And yeah, I've got tears running down my face. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
So, kind of walking toward the end of our conversation, something that I know has been very present for you and also could be hard to talk about. You've experienced a lot of grief and a lot of
Yeah.
loss. And I wonder if you'd be open to sharing some of what you've been learning about the process of grieving.
Right. My dad. So real quickly, my dad's one of 16 children. There's only 2 left, and they were all married. So I had an aunt and uncle, right, and then a bunch of cousins. We're in the roofing business, right, the family, and so cousins and uncles and whatnot who've fallen off of roofs. And I buried a daughter in 1991 in my first marriage that died from umbilical strangulation when at birth. And 2 brothers from drug addiction incidents. My brother Steve had been sick since he was 14. He died 2 years ago at 63 years old. And my brother Mike just passed in February. I'm the oldest of 7. I have 5 brothers, and 4 of my younger brothers have gone. And so grief is something that I've experienced often. I've learned that grief is to be embraced, right? My daughter taught me the biggest lesson around grief, right? When she passed away, I was in the room and I looked up at the ceiling and told God or the creator, right? I called him God at the time, right? I have a different understanding. I just said, I said some nasty words and said, this can't be, there's no blessing in this, right? This is bullshit. you know. But what I learned over the years was that the first thing it taught me was what not to say to somebody that just lost a child, because of what folks
Wow.
who thought they were being helpful.
Wow.
Oh, well, you got two healthy kids and you're young enough, you can have another one, so it'll be okay. It was like, can I just smack you in the head right now, please? Would that be okay? You know, and other stuff, right? It helped me a lot, to know what not to say and to know what to say, which is very little to say.
Yes.
You know, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm here for you at whatever way I can be, and I got a lot of love for
Yes.
you. And much more than that is like, and as time goes on, right, it's, can we talk about, what do you want to tell me about your loss? Yeah. And, I just finished the grief educator certification course with David Kessler, who's part of the Mankind Project. I didn't know David prior to. He's in California, and I'm grateful for his generosity in allowing me to be able to be there. And I'm going to be meeting with him again on Tuesday. And I'm still sorting all that stuff out, right? Grief is, first of all, unique to everybody.
Yeah.
And there's no time limit on how long someone grieves. I left a job. I was a plant manager. I was closing in on 6 figures a year. And part of the reason I left is it was in April, about it was about 14 years after Gabrielle had passed, my daughter. And my boss said to me, "So you seem kind of down today, Jim. What's going on?" I said, "Yeah, today would have been my daughter's birthday, and I'd have been celebrating with cake and ice cream or taking her out to dinner." I said, "But she passed." He says, "You need to get over that stuff and get back to work. When are you going to get over that?" And I was like, "Dude, you have no idea." It wasn't the only reason I left, but it was one of the things that put me on that path. And I find it easy for me to relate to folks who are grieving, because just of the body knowledge. My body senses your body's grief, and I'm going to project my embracing grief on to you, right? And I don't know how that might sound, but that's the best way I know how to describe it. Thank you. Did I answer that question?
Yes. Good answer, Jim. Good answer. So there are men out there who are right now like you were before you started doing this work. And is there something that you would want to say, speaking directly to a man like you out there in the world?
Yeah, trust the process, right? And don't give up. And if you really want to learn something about yourself, go and have a conversation with the last man that you would like to speak to about any particular topic, because he's going to teach you the most. And these aren't my words of wisdom. These are things that were shared with me that I learned to listen to, right? I called a man up and I said, "Yo, bro, I got this problem," and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, "Well, who's the last man, Jim, in your circle that you'd want to speak to about that?" And I said, "So and so." He said, "Well, call that man up and ask him, because he's got the greatest gift for you." Right? It's in our, right? When I was working out in the gym, right? Or training for wrestling or football or whatever it was, right? There's no pain, there's no gain without pain. And that's the whole process. If I'm going to surround myself with folks that agree with me, I'm really not going to grow. Right? A tree that's kept in a greenhouse can't withstand the wind because it doesn't bend and heal and mend and break and bow and do all that goofy stuff. And be gentle with yourself. Put that internal self-oppressing critic to rest. Don't kick him out. Don't kill him. Welcome him when he shows up and say thank you and send him on his way. You don't listen to him. Because he's going to keep showing up. He does for me, even today. And I go, yeah, thanks. I remember you. I'll see you again in a couple months. Go away. And he might show up again tomorrow. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Jim Katona, I feel blessed and honored to be your friend.
Ditto, bro.
Thanks for spending some time with me. Everybody, I'll put some contact info for Jim if you want to reach out, learn more about respect, and learn more about the spirit of harmonious cooperation. And come back and listen to us again.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us. It happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.